We are enormously privileged today to have Lord Krebs here from the Climate Change Committee to introduce today's events and to say some words for us. He's going to talk about SUDS and climate change. Professor Lord Krebs of Witham is Emeritus Professor of Zoology at Oxford University. He was Chairman of the National Environmental Research Council from 1994 to 1999, Chairman of the Food Standard Agency between 2000 and 2005, Chairman of the House of Lords Science and Technology Select Committee from 2010 to 2014 and President of the British Science Association in 2012. Lord Krebs has chaired the Committee for Climate Change Adaptation Subcommittee since 2010. Lord Krebs.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you for inviting me to this really important event. And what's really striking about the work that Syria has been doing is how well aligned it is with the thinking of the Climate Change Committee and the Adaptation Subcommittee, of which I'm the chairman. Just to remind you, the Climate Change Committee and its Adaptation Subcommittee were set up by the 2008 Climate Change Act, and our job is both to advise the government on how to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and how to increase our resilience in the face of inevitable climate change, but secondly, to report to Parliament on progress that the government is making. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the progress report that we put to Parliament in July this year. And just as a preamble, when it comes to thinking about building resilience for the future for a different climate, one has to think of cost-effective measures that follow really three principles. One is measures that are low regrets, that you'd want to do for a variety of reasons anyway, measures that are avoiding lock-in to unsustainable developments in the future, and measures that retain flexibility. And one of those measures that fits really with low regret and flexibility and avoiding lock-in is SUDS. So that figures quite strongly in our July report. Just in terms of background, and this is familiar, I'm sure, to all of you, if we take the July 2007 floods as a benchmark, a very major flood event, 55,000 properties flooded, many of them from drains and sewers that were overwhelmed. We know that the traditional piped sewers can't cope with heavy rain events like that even today, and that half the sewerage network is at or beyond capacity. The other day, my committee had a meeting with Brendan McCafferty, the Chief Executive of Flood Re, and he told us that 70 to 80% of the claims in the 2013-14 floods were from properties that are not in recognised flood risk areas, and many of those were subject to surface water flooding. Turning to climate change, we know from the climate change risk assessments that the government commissioned in 2012, and the Adaptation Subcommittee is about to produce a revised risk assessment, but we know from that flood risk, riverine, coastal and pluvial surface water flooding are the biggest risks to the United Kingdom that will arise from climate change. Events that are currently rare will become commoner, and events that are severe will become very severe in the future from the climate change projections that the Met Office Hadley Centre has produced. So we can expect surface water flooding, particularly in urban areas, to become more of a problem in the future. And our report to Parliament highlighted the importance of SUDS as part of the way of increasing the resilience of our towns and cities. Hence, we very much welcome your two new publications that are being launched today. And you also highlight, as we did in our report, that SUDS bring multiple benefits. You talk about the four pillars of the quality of water, the quantity of water, the amenity value, and the impact or provision for biodiversity. We particularly drew within that framework our attention to the fact that not only do we expect there to be more severe rainfall events in the future and more frequent ones, we expect there to be long hot periods in the summer, and the urban heat island is a very important factor in heat stress for our population. And of course, SUDS, in developed in the right way, can help to contribute to a green space in urban areas and reduce the urban heat island. Just looking at what's happening in terms of the surface of our towns and cities, we know from figures that we commissioned analyses that between 2001 and 2011, the number of front gardens paved over rose from 28% to 48% of the area, and only 4% of residential paving sales were permeable. So there's a lot going on to make our surfaces in our towns and cities less permeable, less absorbent, and less resilient. Furthermore, the provisions that Pitt recommended after the July 2007 floods and that were agreed by Parliament have been weakened since then. They haven't really been adopted in the way that Sir Michael Pitt intended. And some of the barriers to adopting the Pitt recommendations on SUDS are that developers still have the right to connect to the existing sewerage system. It's not clear who pays for, who owns and maintains SUDS. There isn't any monitoring of the uptake of SUDS, and local lead flood authorities are not doing enough to develop their strategies. In fact, by April this year, more than half lead local flood authorities had not finished their flood alleviation or flood management strategy. Some of them are reallocating funds to other priorities. So there's a lot of work to be done. Finally, it's not clear whether water companies, in fulfilling their obligation to reduce sewer flooding by 33% by 2020, will employ SUDS as part of their strategy. So on the back of that, we made 6 very clear recommendations to the government in our July report. Number 1, remove the automatic right to connect, which would really focus minds on alternative ways of dealing with surface water flooding. 2, develop an action plan to improve the development of local flood risk management plans. Recommendation 3, make water companies statutory consultees on planning applications that have implications for sewerage. Number 4, monitor the uptake of SUDS. Number 5, require local authorities to limit paving over soft surfaces with impermeable hard paving. And number 6, require Ofwat to ask water companies to report on their use of SUDS in reducing the overflowing of sewers. The government, in its response, I have to say, was a little bit disappointing. They accepted clearly only one of these recommendations, action to improve local flood risk management plans. So we welcome that bit. On the other hand, they think that most of the other recommendations are covered by the recent changes to planning policy. And you may share doubts as to whether that's actually going to happen. Far from me to say. On SUDS, they say they will undertake a consultation. I'd have thought the time for consultation is over. The time is here for action. On paving over with impermeable paving stones or surfaces, paving over soft surfaces, they say that's up to local authorities and not up to central government. So we don't see eye to eye with the government on the issue of surface water flooding in general and with SUDS in particular. We will continue to make our case, and we have the opportunity to report to Parliament on progress to build resilience every 2 years. So we'll be reporting again in 2017, and we can reiterate our concerns. In the Climate Change Risk Assessment Evidence Report that we will produce for the government next summer, we will again have a chance to reiterate our concerns about surface water flooding as a major risk for the future. So we will do our bit. We see that the construction sector has a hugely important role to play, and we see Syria's guidance as a huge step forward, and we hope will go a long way to securing the type of urban design that is more resilient both today and, importantly, for our children and grandchildren in the future when the climate will be very different. So I welcome the publication of the reports and their launch today, and thank you very much again for inviting me, and I hope that the afternoon session proves to be fruitful and exciting for you. Thank you very much.